Hello, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. My name is Liza, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Zerion. And today I'll be assisting Customer Success Manager and iForm Builder Trainer Berit, who will be presenting on two new exciting new iForm Builder elements, HTTP requests and MultiPhoto. And if this is your first webinar with us, I want to let you all know that this webinar will be recorded. So in 24 to 48 hours, you all will be receiving an email from us with the recording, any resources that we mentioned, and the slides. So if you maybe want to send this to your teammates, or maybe you missed something and want to go back, don't worry, all of this will be in your email soon.
All right, well, great, thank you. And thank you, Liza, for stepping in and hosting today's session. As you guys know, if at any point you have questions, just put them in the chat and we are more than happy to answer them at any time. So to give you a little bit of a background of what we'll be talking through today, we will start by talking through the multi-photo element. I'll go ahead and give a demo on how to add that to the form. Then we'll go through the HTTP request element. I'll do a demo there. And lastly, we'll talk through some of our upcoming events. So first thing first, let's jump into our multi-photo. So if you haven't seen this yet or haven't seen any of our material on it, the multi-photo allows you to take multiple photos in one element. So the development of this actually came about because we found that our customers were using the subform element with the drawing or image element, and that was working great, except for the fact that it was taking them a while to capture those photos. So with the multi-photo element, since you just have to launch one element, you're able to take up to 6 photos and then have that come back as a JSON object into your data. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start by actually looking at these dynamic attributes and adding a multi-photo element to a form using these dynamic attributes. As you can see, there are 3 different dynamic attributes that we're going to go through. We'll go through how we force a camera to be used, how we force the library to be used, and then how to change the default number of photos that can be captured. So let's go ahead and jump in. I've just created a form here just called multi-photo dynamic attributes. I'll send this form package over to you after today's session, so that you can have this as a resource. So here we are. Hopefully everyone's familiar with our form builder interface. I'm going to scroll down here to our multi-photo element, so you can see that right here, and just add that to the form. So the first step we're going to do with our multi-photo is we want to change how many photos are being captured. So for this dynamic attribute, or for this element, let's just assume that we are capturing a building that only has 4 sides. So we'll ask the user to take a picture of every side of the building. We'll even make it a little clearer and say take a photo of all 4 sides. Okay, and then I'm going to change the name so that that is, of course, helpful and not my element 1. That's a best practice that we have in form building, so pay attention to that. As I scroll down in the element properties, this is where you're going to see the dynamic attributes. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to change the multi-photo element limit. So I'm going to select that first one. And because we only want the user to capture 4 images, I'm going to put the value 4 in that number. The next piece we're going to do, and again, if I jump back to these slides here, these are the steps that we're going to complete. The first one we just did, we added a multi-photo element with the default to 4. The next one we're going to do is we're going to force the camera to be used. So let's either select the multi-photo element from the left-hand side or copy it from our form right now by just hitting the copy button. So for this one, let's have it still default to the 6, so not the 4 this time. We'll remove that dynamic attribute and just say take brand new photos. In the element properties, I am going to delete this this limit that we had because we had copied the previous one. So we'll just delete that. Go down to our dynamic attributes again and disable the photo library. So what this will do, and I'll show you in a minute once we test our form on our device, is this will only allow the user to have access to the camera. They won't be able to go into the photo library. So let's go ahead and make that selection. As you can see, this is turned on. And I will say you can have more than one dynamic attribute for this element. So let's say you do want to have the user capture 4 photos and make sure that they're all brand new. You would be able to have the limit and the photo disable photo library enabled. All right, lastly, let's do this final step here where we're going to force the library to be used and disable the camera. So again, I can either select the multi-photo from the left-hand side or make a copy in the form in this little interface here. So I'll just do the top copy again. And I'll tell the users to select photos from the library. I'll scroll down here. And again, I'm going to disable the one that I had copied. And I'm going to choose to disable the camera so that I'm only allowed to capture photos from the photo library. Now I'm going to save my form here and bring up my device. And I'm just allowing it to sync right now, so just bear with me here. So now, if everyone can see my screen again, here is that first element. We see this is now updated to 4. And at the very bottom, it does allow me to do the camera as well as the photo library because I see both icons at the bottom. So let me just take some new photos. Now you'll notice the only way I know that I've taken I've taken a photo at all is at the bottom. It says that I've taken 1 out of 4. So let me keep going. You can see that number increases. And then after 4 photos are captured, I can hit done. And that brings me back to the form. You'll also notice when we go into this element, and I'll show you in just a minute, you did have those little boxes that you can make selections for. So if you are reviewing those photos and notice that one wasn't very clear, you can make that selection, select that one photo, delete it, and then take another one. Now here is our multi-photo element where we are forcing the camera to be used. So at the bottom, you'll notice I don't have that library icon. So let me come in here, take brand new photos. Again, these photos are not very exciting right now because I'm just taking my screen. But as you can see, here's where we can make the selection if we need to, and then delete. For now, I'll just take that as done. And then lastly, I can select photos from the library. So now I don't have the camera icon at the bottom, but I do have the library icon. But let me just make those selections. And here we have them in here, and I'll hit done. So here I'm just going to go under data and view. And the multi-photo element does work on web forms as well. And here's a quick snapshot on the data exports. So our HTTP request, it's an element that queries APIs and it stores the results as the JSON object. So both the multi-photo and the HTTP request do save the item as JSON. With the HTTP request, we must use a public API. In a future phase, we hope to allow our customers to use private APIs as well, but as it stands now, it must be public. The HTTP request element is our first online required element. You do need to make sure your users have either their Wi-Fi or cellular connection for this to work. Some of the use cases include scanning data for a lookup, to view current weather, maybe to see a site history, to also check for unique values, and maybe look up previously submitted records. So for our demo today, what I'm actually going to show you how to do is with the HTTP request element, we're going to take the location that's captured on the form and get the street address. So when you get this presentation, you'll actually get a list of steps here that I've done, but I'll walk you through it in the form design. So again, we're going to do the reverse geocoding. And the first thing I did was I added the location element to my form. So in this case, it is called house_GPS. Now I wanted to point this out because when it comes to using our HTTP request, we are going to reference this element. So the next thing that I did is I actually created a free account with the software GeoAppify, which allows for reverse geocoding. I found this out just by doing some Google searching. I had previously used Google, but Google does charge you, so I wanted to go with more of a free experience here. So I found this to be a great tool to use. What I did after I created the account is it shows you what the structure would look like with a post, with a HTTP request. With this, I was able to understand what the data looked like and how it would come in. So if I jump over here, I had to generate an API key. The URL that I got from them was this sample. So in this URL, you'll notice that it does include a lat and long. So this is point of data that it showed in my example. And then the longitude was listed right after. And then we have our API key. Now this API key was generated when I created my account. So this is specific to my GeoAppify account. So what we have to do with the HTTP request element is after we add the HTTP request element to our form, we have to update that URL to reference the location element that we previously added. What we're going to reference, we have to use the parent form name dot location element data column name dot latitude, and then the parent form name dot location element dot longitude. So in my example, and again, I'll show you this on my form, is we start the URL with exactly what GeoAppify gave us as the sample. Where they had the latitude, we want that to constantly update to where the user is located. So we use the $, and then we use our parent form name dot, and then our location element data column name, which I pointed out to you earlier, dot latitude, and then close the squirrely brackets, and then do the same thing for the longitude element. So when I jump over to my form, I've added the HTTP request element. If you scroll down, you have to choose that it's a request URL out of the dynamic attributes, and then you update that request URL in the dynamic attributes. So if I scroll over, you'll see that I have my API key in there. I have the reference to the location element and the longitude, and then also the reference to the latitude. If you want to follow along or add this to your project later, some of the steps just include creating a GeoAppify account and then updating this URL to point to your parent form name and your location element data column names. So once you add the HTTP request, when we go into the form itself, we'll see that we can test that that is functioning and working properly because it's able to call to that environment. So what we strongly suggest is when you're testing the HTTP request element, test using web forms or public links, because once you have the HTTP request generated, you can test and see the details of how the data appears, the array that it's set up. So here's the example where I'm going to capture my house GPS. You do have to allow your browser to capture your location, and I have set that up. So I'm going to confirm my current location, and once this is confirmed, then it is going to show me the HTTP request element underneath. So I see a street address request. This is our HTTP request that we've configured. Once in here, I'm going to tell the element to make that call. So I hit the little arrow, and underneath it, I see the street address results. Now, this is another element that I've included. I would hide this from the user, but this is a way to get all of the data into your form. When you're testing the HTTP request, as I mentioned, you do want to test on web forms because it gives you this more detail section. Once I click on the more detail, it shows me what the GET request is. It also shows me the response and how the data appears. So this is where I need to understand this data so that I can then do the following step where I get the formatted address. So if I jump back to my form that I've built, so we now know that the HTTP request is working. It was a success. Go to the next step, which is where I'm taking data from that request and posting it into a text area or a read-only or text element, however you want to have it set up. Because this is an array, you do have to follow that format with your JavaScript. You'll notice in here, again, I start with that parent form name dot, and then I call to the HTTP request element dot, and then I use response dot, and then features, which is coming from the array here. I ended it with properties dot formatted. So I had, when you look at the array, you'll see properties as one of the next sections and then formatted in that section. So that's how I'm able to actually add in and capture the street address from the users. Now what we've done is I've also put a sample in here where we have our weather request, so you can test that out as well. And if I go back to my web form, I can show you how that appears. So I have weather request, I have to submit that call, I get the status 200, that's good, that means everything was successful. I can look at the more details to see what data I have in there, and I've parsed out just to have the current temperature displayed. So as I mentioned, all the steps for the HTTP request are listed here, and we'll have the recording, so if you want to go back, I'm also more than happy to walk you through this at another time if you have questions. But I've also created a link so that you can test this on your device as well. This is using our public links. And we do have some best practices. So as I mentioned, we strongly urge you to test with web forms so that you can see the JSON response. And also to make sure that your users understand that Wi-Fi or cellular connection is required. If you don't have Wi-Fi or cell connection, you just won't be able to use that element. All other elements would be still accessible though. Now, Liza, are there any questions, as well as can we launch both polls, one about our MultiPhoto and one about the HTTP request?
Of course, I will launch the first poll, and also we do have a question about if you're able to label the MultiPhoto at all.
That is a great question. So one of the other reasons that we started working on the MultiPhoto element is we wanted to allow our customers to add like timestamps, location stamps, as well as add captions to the photo itself. So that is something we are planning on rolling out in the future. So definitely keep an eye out for some of our later phases.
Great, and we have another question. This one is about HTTP request. And it's just asking how tech savvy do they need to be in order to use this element?
So it does require some additional configurations. What my experience has been is once you've done it once, then it's easier to pick up how to set it up for the future. Again, if you just follow our help desk article or follow some of the steps that I have here and you just do the basic steps within your own form, once you've done it once, you understand, okay, I need to get a public API and that URL. I need to update that URL to point to the elements within my forms. If you are referencing like location like I did, and then it's just understanding how to look at the array or the data so that you can parse out the fields that are applicable to you.
Are there limitations on the total size of the image data in MultiPhoto for syncing? And they specifically use full image size.
You do want to do some testing on your end. If you're going to use the MultiPhoto element a lot in a form and you are requiring the full size images, then that is going to impact your upload speed, which could then turn to timing out on the device. So before I let everybody go, I do want to just talk through some of our upcoming webinars and trainings. We do have a form builder certification. This is September 20th to the 23rd from 10 a.m. to 12. This is a buy one, get one. So if you have 2 people on your team that want to attend, wonderful. You only have to purchase 1 seat, and you just let me know who those people are that are attending, and then we'll make sure that we mark the person who's free who's supposed to be. I also want to share with you that we are adding a new webinar series. So this is our Zerion Lightning series. The Zerion Lightning series are designed to be hyper-focused on iForm Builder and Zerion content, so that if you're new to iForm Builder or if there's some features that you haven't yet used, you can jump right in and just learn specifically on that product or element or just functionality. For our first one on September 21st, this is going to be focused all on our option list. We have an advanced form building workshop. So this is designed for anyone who's ever attended our certification and is Form Builder certified. We urge you to sign up and attend this workshop to get a little deeper with our JavaScript and building more advanced forms. And lastly, in December, we are going to have a webinar on what is the Zerion data flow, as well as how to get started making use of it. Now, before I let anyone go, are there any more questions, Liza?
Yes, we have a few more that have come in. So let's see, we have another one about the multiphoto. So they said that the multiphoto element has a limit on the number of images. Can you also require a minimum number?
Great question. So yeah, we are saying you can put in the maximum. Right now, we do not have a way to do minimum, I don't think. But let me get back to you on that, because we might be able to do it with some sort of JavaScript and having another element in there saying, telling the user that they have to go back and add additional photos. But let me definitely get back to you on that one. Great question. All right, with that, I want to thank everyone for your time today. Thank you, Liza, for hosting. And again, sorry about some of our little hiccups with technology. It happens, but I appreciate everyone taking the time and effort to be with me today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. We hope to see you at our next webinar.